typing at 100 words per minute looks something like this. With the Steno keyboard, it is possible to write at twice that speed without requiring particularly fast fingers. Contrary to what a lot of people think, Steno can also be used to write code. And even LaTeX. It seems to be a common misconception that Steno is horrible for use cases other than typing tests. In fact, for the last year and a half, I've exclusively been using my Steno keyboard at my PC. So how does it work? The short answer is that stenography can be thought of as a giant macro pad where we press multiple keys down all at once. Although there are only 23 keys on the layout, this gives us over 8 million possible key combinations, or chords as they're called. That is more than enough to encode the English language, symbols, shortcuts, movement keys, and basically anything that a regular keyboard can type. At the software level, when I press a chord, it is sent to a Steno engine and gets translated into the textual output. Steno engines use files called dictionaries that contain these one-to-one translations. However, I'm not memorizing every single entry in these dictionaries. That would be insane. Instead, there are rules and systems that make stenography very predictable. For writing English with Steno, we use a mix of sounds and spelling to break down words. Different chords on the Steno layout represent different sounds, and we can add these chords together to make up entire syllables. Here's how I would write the word cat. This key represents the initial hard C consonant, the left thumb key represents the A vowel, and the right pinky is pressing the ending T sound. To write the word kit, which only differs in the vowel sound, I would write this chord. It is exactly the same as cat, except for the keys that represent the vowel. So what about words with multiple syllables? Well, we just split these words into their individual syllables and write each one in sequence. For example, Kit Kat is written like this. And this is how I would write the word generate. Any sound in the English language has an associated chord on the Steno layout. So to write regular words, it's just a matter of memorizing these chords and putting them together to form entire words. This means that fewer than 100 unique chords need to be memorized. That is way less than having to memorize a single chord for every word. Although the usage of dictionaries means a word has to be defined before you can write it, you can still use letter-by-letter spelling for these situations. This technique, called fingerspelling, involves memorizing a left-hand chord for each letter of the alphabet. This can be quite slow, but some people take this a step further and chunk multiple letters in each chord. So what about writing stuff that's not just English words? There are plenty of chords on the layout that aren't actually used for English and can be repurposed for other uses. For example, I can press down this chord with my left hand, turning the right hand side into a bank of symbols. You do have to memorize a chord for each symbol on the right hand, but that's not any different than remembering the key locations on a QWERTY keyboard. They are also arranged quite memorably with several patterns and mnemonics. For writing numbers, if I press this key on the left hand, I can turn this right hand cluster of keys into a number pad, just like the one you'd find on a calculator. For shortcuts, I press a chord with my right hand, pressing this cluster into Ctrl, Shift, Alt, and Super. I can combine this with a left-hand side letter chord to get shortcuts like Ctrl A, Ctrl C, and Ctrl Shift V. I also have an alternative system I use for left-hand only shortcuts. I press a chord representing Ctrl, Shift, Alt, or Super, and then a left-hand chord for the key. For emoji, I press a prefix chord to denote that the next stroke is an emoji, and then just write the name as if it was English. For editing text, it is not any different to some of these systems I've gone over so far. For moving the text cursor, I press a chord on the left hand, turning this right hand cluster into arrow keys. This is up, right, down, and left. Selecting text is almost exactly the same, just with a different left-hand chord. This is a full list of all of the editing commands that I personally use. There are also other advanced techniques like double tapping and holding for repeat, and using only the right hand without the left-hand chord. For things like LaTeX, it is just a matter of defining your own memorable chords for the functions you often use. All of my LaTeX chords start with this key, and I just write the name of the function as if it is English. This is the chord for the word dot, and this is my chord for the LaTeX dot function. This is the chord that represents the frac sound, and this is the chord for writing fractions with LaTeX. As you probably saw from the demos, Steno can be very fast for prose and very ergonomic. Because there are only 2 rows of keys and each finger doesn't move laterally very much, it is very comfortable compared to a regular keyboard. So, should you learn Steno just for these benefits? Well, probably not if I'm being honest. It's certainly not for everyone as it takes a lot of time and effort to learn. For me personally, it took 3 months to get to 80 words per minute. By the end of my first year of learning, I was at 150 to 200 words per minute. I should note, however, that this was during COVID and I was in 10th grade. I picked up the skill at a fairly fast pace. Most people take 6 months to a year to reach 100 words per minute. That being said, you might be ecstatic about the speed and ergonomic aspect, or maybe you just love learning new things. If this is the case, I definitely encourage you to try it out. It only takes about 1 to 2 months to fully understand how everything works. At this point, you'll have completely internalized Steno and don't have to consciously think about it. It is a very gratifying feeling. I've been using Steno for 4 years now and I completely and wholeheartedly enjoy it. The ergonomics and speed are just amazing to have. When I write prose, my thoughts are not held back by my typing speed. When I edit text, everything feels so much more efficient. If you're considering learning Steno, I recommend watching my Hobbyist Guide to Stenography. If you prefer reading instead, check out my Lapwing for Beginners online book. You will probably find yourself there anyway if you are serious about learning. One thing I haven't covered yet is the multilingual aspect of Steno. Unfortunately, English Steno is already very niche as it is. We don't often get new members outside of Anglophone countries, and so the multilingual scene is a bit lacking. Systems for other languages do exist though, and I've even created my own Vietnamese Steno system that can easily be toggled on and off. I do hope we can get more community members working on other languages. If I knew how to speak another language, I'd definitely be working on that. Alas, I am only fluent in English and cannot contribute there. Anyway, these last 4 years of being in the hobbyist Steno community have literally been life-changing to me. And as you can probably tell, I absolutely love it. It seems every few years I make a new video showcasing what I'm able to do with it, as I just cannot contain my excitement. Thanks for watching, and I hope you consider picking up Steno as a new hobby.